When I saw my wedding dress on another woman, I felt something inside me unravel, quietly, like a seam splitting in the dark. It was a Saturday in late spring, the kind of day that smells like cut grass and distant rain. I was standing in the back of St. Mary's Church, hands folded, trying to be invisible. The bride was radiant, everyone said, but all I could see was the dress. My dress. The one I'd chosen with trembling hands and a hopeful heart years ago, when I still believed that love could make you family. I should have been happy for her. I tried to be. But as she walked down the aisle, lace trailing behind her, I felt a coldness settle in my chest. It was the same coldness I'd felt the first time my mother-in-law called me dear with that careful, distant smile. The same coldness that crept in every time I tried to belong. I never imagined I'd be the kind of woman who stood in the shadows at a wedding, clutching secrets and swallowing tears. But here I was, watching my mother-in-law's real daughter, her true child, as she once let slip, float past me in the dress I'd worn on the happiest day of my life. I suppose I should start at the beginning, before the dress, before the betrayal, before I learned that sometimes the people you call family can break your heart in ways you never see coming. Before I married Daniel, my life was simple. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew your business, but they also knew your favorite pie and the name of your childhood dog. My parents ran a bakery on Main Street, and I spent my afternoons, dusted in flour, listening to my mother hum old gospel songs as she kneaded dough. When Daniel came into my life, it felt like a door opening. He was gentle, with a quiet laugh, and eyes that always seemed to be searching for something good in the world. We met at the bakery, of all places. He came in for a cinnamon roll and left with my phone number scribbled on a napkin. Our courtship was slow and sweet. Sunday picnics, long walks by the river, evenings spent talking about dreams and disappointments. He told me about his family, his mother, Evelyn, who raised him alone after his father left, his half-sister, Leela, who lived with her father in another state but visited every summer. He spoke of them with a kind of reverence, as if they were fragile things he needed to protect. The first time I met Evelyn, she greeted me with a polite smile and a cool handshake. Her house was immaculate, every cushion fluffed, every picture frame perfectly straight. She offered me tea in a china cup and asked about my family, my education, my plans. I could feel her measuring me, weighing my answers. "She's just protective," Daniel said later, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "She'll come around." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that love was enough. Our engagement was quiet, just the two of us on a bench by the river, the sun setting behind the trees. Daniel slipped a simple gold band onto my finger and promised me a life of kindness and honesty. I said yes, my heart full of hope. Planning the wedding was a whirlwind. My mother and I spent hours poring over magazines, debating flowers and menus. But the dress, that was mine alone. I found it in a little shop on the edge of town, tucked between racks of tulle and satin. It was ivory, with delicate lace sleeves and a row of tiny buttons down the back. When I tried it on, I felt like myself, only braver somehow. Evelyn offered to help with the wedding, but her suggestions always felt like corrections. "Maybe something simpler," she'd say, eyeing my choices. Lila always preferred classic styles. She never raised her voice, never said anything outright cruel, but there was a distance, a sense that I was being tolerated rather than welcomed. Still, I tried. I baked her favorite lemon bars, invited her to dress fittings, sent her photos of flower arrangements. She responded with polite nods and tight smiles. Daniel assured me it was just her way, The wedding itself was beautiful. My parents cried, Daniel beamed, and for one perfect day, I felt like I belonged. Evelyn hugged me at the reception, her arms stiff around my shoulders. "Welcome to the family," she said, her voice soft but unreadable. After the wedding, life settled into a gentle routine. Daniel and I moved into a small house on Maple Lane, close enough to visit my parents on Sundays, and Evelyn on holidays. I started teaching at the local elementary school, and Daniel worked at the hardware store. We made dinners together, argued about laundry, laughed over old movies. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Evelyn visited often, always with a casserole or a new set of towels. She never stayed long, but she always found something to comment on. The dust on the windowsill, the way I folded the napkins, the brand of coffee I bought. I tried not to take it personally. She just wants to help, Daniel would say, squeezing my hand. Sometimes I caught her looking at me with a strange expression, something like longing or maybe regret. I wondered if she missed Lila, if I was just a placeholder, until her real daughter came home. But I told myself it didn't matter. I had Daniel. I had my work. I had a life I'd built with my own hands. I didn't need her approval, or so I thought. It was the little things that started to change first. A shift in the air, a pause in conversation, a look that lingered just a second too long. I noticed it most when Lila came to visit. Lila was everything Evelyn wanted in a daughter. Tall, elegant, with a laugh that filled a room. She wore her hair in a neat chignon and spoke with the easy confidence of someone who'd always been adored. She lived in Chicago, working as a graphic designer, and her visits were rare but celebrated. The first time I met her, she swept into the house with a bouquet of lilies and a bottle of wine, kissing Evelyn on both cheeks. "Mother, you look radiant," she said, her voice warm and practiced. She turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "So you're the famous baker's daughter." I smiled back, trying to ignore the way Evelyn's face lit up in her presence. "It's nice to finally meet you, Lila. Daniel's told me so much about you." She laughed, a little too loudly. "All lies, I'm sure." That weekend, the house was full of laughter and stories I didn't understand. Inside jokes, childhood memories, references to people I'd never met. I tried to join in, but I always felt a step behind, like I was watching a play from backstage. Evelyn fussed over Lila, making her favorite meals, pressing her to eat more, to rest, to tell stories about her life in the city. Daniel seemed happy, caught up in the nostalgia, but I felt like an outsider in my own home. After dinner one night, I found Evelyn and Lila in the living room, heads bent together over a photo album. I hovered in the doorway, unsure if I was welcome. "Come join us, dear," Evelyn called, her tone polite but distant. I sat on the edge of the sofa, hands folded in my lap. Lila flipped through the pages, pointing out old photos. Her first day of school, a trip to the beach, Christmas mornings. There were a few pictures of Daniel, but none of me, of course. Evelyn glanced at me, her eyes softening for a moment. "We should add some wedding photos, don't you think?" I nodded, surprised. I'd like that. Lila smiled, but there was something in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or something sharper. "I'd love to see your dress." Daniel said it was beautiful. I felt a flush creep up my neck. It was. I still have it actually, packed away in the closet. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. "It's a lovely dress, very classic." I tried to hold on to that moment, that small gesture of inclusion, but it slipped away as quickly as it came. After Lila left, things returned to normal, or so I thought. But Evelyn's visits became more frequent, her comments more pointed. "Have you thought about starting a family?" she asked one afternoon, her eyes fixed on the teacup in her hands. I hesitated. We're not in a rush. I want to focus on my career for a bit. She nodded, but I could feel her disappointment. Lila always wanted children. She used to play with dolls for hours. I smiled politely, biting back a retort. I knew better than to argue. One evening, as I was folding laundry, Daniel came into the room, his face troubled. "Mom called," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "She wants to know if you'd be willing to lend your dress to Lila. She's getting married next spring." I froze. A pair of socks clutched in my hands. "My dress?" He nodded, avoiding my eyes. "She said it would mean a lot to Lila. You know, something borrowed." I felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride, confusion, hurt. I don't know, Daniel. That dress means a lot to me. He reached for my hand. "I know, but maybe it's a way to bring everyone closer. Mom thinks it would be a nice gesture." I wanted to say no. I wanted to scream. But I saw the hope in his eyes, the longing for peace, for family. So I nodded, swallowing my pride. "If it means that much, she can borrow it. But I want it back." He smiled, relief flooding his face. "Thank you. You're amazing, you know that." I tried to smile, but my heart felt heavy. A week later, Evelyn came by to pick up the dress. She handled it with care, her fingers tracing the lace, her eyes shining with something I couldn't name. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Lila will look stunning in it." I nodded, forcing a smile. "Just make sure it comes back in one piece." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment I thought she might say something kind, something real. But she just nodded and left, the dress draped over her arm like a trophy. I watched her go, a strange sense of loss settling over me. It was just a dress, I told myself. Just fabric and thread, but it felt like more than that. It felt like a piece of myself was leaving with her. The days that followed felt strangely empty. I tried to fill the space with work, with baking, with long walks around the neighborhood. But every time I opened my closet and saw the empty spot where my wedding dress had hung, I felt a pang of regret. I told myself it was temporary, that I was doing the right thing, that this was what family meant: sacrifice, compromise, generosity. But the truth was, I missed it. I missed the way the lace felt against my skin, the way Daniel's eyes had filled with tears when he first saw me in it. I missed the memory of my mother zipping it up, her hands trembling with pride. I missed the feeling of belonging, of being chosen. Daniel tried to reassure me. "It's just a dress, love. We still have the memories." He kissed my forehead, but I could tell he didn't understand. How could he? For him, the dress was a symbol. For me, it was a piece of my story. A few weeks later, I got a call from my mother. "Did you know Lila's wedding is going to be at St. Mary's?" she asked, her voice gentle. I hadn't known. "No, I didn't. She's having a big ceremony. Evelyn's been telling everyone how excited she is. She said Lila's going to look like a princess in that dress." I felt my stomach twist. "I'm sure she will." My mother hesitated. "Are you all right, sweetheart?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to be strong. But the words caught in my throat. "I'm fine, Mom." "Really?" After we hung up, I sat in the kitchen, staring at the chipped mug in my hands. I thought about calling Evelyn, about asking for the dress back, about telling her how much it meant to me. But I didn't. I told myself it was too late, that I'd already agreed, that I didn't want to cause trouble. But the feeling lingered, a quiet ache, a sense of being erased. The weeks slipped by, and soon it was time for Lila's wedding. Daniel and I were invited, of course. Evelyn called to make sure we'd be there, her voice bright with anticipation. "It's going to be a beautiful day," she said. "Lila is so grateful for your generosity. She can't wait for you to see her in the dress." I forced a smile. I'm happy for her. The morning of the wedding, I woke early. The house was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of rain. Daniel was already up, pacing the living room, his suit jacket draped over a chair. "You ready?" he asked, his voice soft. I nodded, smoothing the skirt of my dress. As ready as I'll ever be. We drove to the church in silence, the windshield wipers beating a steady rhythm. I watched the world blur past, my thoughts tangled and restless. When we arrived, the church was already buzzing with guests. Evelyn greeted us at the door, her eyes shining with pride. "You look lovely, dear," she said, kissing my cheek. "Thank you again for the dress." "Leela is over the moon." I smiled, but it felt brittle. "I'm glad she's happy." Inside, the pews were filled with friends and family, all dressed in their Sunday best. I found a seat near the back, my hands folded in my lap. Daniel sat beside me, his fingers laced with mine. The music started and everyone stood. I craned my neck, searching for Lila. When she appeared at the end of the aisle, my breath caught in my throat. She was radiant, everyone said. The dress fit her perfectly, the lace gleaming in the soft light. She smiled, her eyes shining, and for a moment, I saw the little girl she must have been, the one Evelyn adored, the one who could do no wrong. I wanted to be happy for her. I wanted to feel proud, but all I could see was the dress. My dress. The one I'd chosen, the one I'd worn on the happiest day of my life. As Lila walked past me, she caught my eye and smiled. It was a small, almost apologetic smile, as if she knew what this meant to me. I tried to smile back, but my lips trembled. The ceremony was beautiful. The vows were heartfelt, the music soaring. Everyone clapped and cheered as Lila and her new husband walked back down the aisle, hand in hand. After the ceremony, there were photos, laughter, champagne. Evelyn floated from guest to guest, her face alight with joy. She barely looked at me. I stood in the corner, watching as Lila posed for pictures, the train of my dress trailing behind her. I felt invisible, like a ghost at my own funeral. Daniel found me by the punch bowl, his brow furrowed. "You okay?" I nodded, blinking back tears. "I just need some air." He squeezed my hand. "Take your time." I slipped outside, the cool air stinging my cheeks. I leaned against the stone wall, closing my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. I told myself it was just a dress, just fabric and thread, but it felt like more than that. It felt like a piece of myself had been given away, and I wasn't sure I'd ever get it back. I stayed outside for a long time, listening to the muffled sounds of celebration drifting through the church doors. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. I watched as the clouds moved across the sky, heavy and grey, threatening rain. I wondered if anyone would notice if I just slipped away, but I didn't. I couldn't. I owed it to Daniel, to myself, to see this through. When I finally went back inside, the reception was in full swing. Lila was surrounded by friends, her cheeks flushed with happiness. Evelyn hovered nearby, beaming with pride, her hand never far from her daughter's arm. I caught Daniel's eye across the room. He gave me a small, encouraging smile. I tried to blend in, to make small talk with distant relatives and old family friends. But everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of what I'd given up. The dress, the smiles, the sense of belonging. I felt like an outsider in a story I was supposed to be part of. At one point, I found myself standing near the gift table, watching as Lila and her new husband opened cards and unwrapped presents. Evelyn fussed over them, making sure every bow was saved. Every card read aloud. Then, as if sensing my gaze, Lila looked up. She excused herself and walked over to me, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. "Thank you for the dress," she said quietly, her voice sincere. "I know it wasn't easy for you." I searched her face, looking for any sign of malice or smugness, but there was none. Just a young woman, grateful, and maybe a little guilty. "It looked beautiful on you," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. She smiled, relief flooding her features. "I promise I'll take good care of it. I'll have it cleaned and returned to you as soon as possible." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. For a moment, we stood there in silence. Two women bound by a piece of fabric, and a complicated family. I wondered if she felt the weight of it, the history stitched into every seam. Before she could say anything else, Evelyn appeared at her side, her eyes flicking between us. "Everything all right?" she asked, her tone light but watchful. Lila nodded, just thanking her for the dress. Evelyn's lips curved into a tight smile. "Yes, we're all so grateful. It's a family heirloom now, isn't it?" I felt something twist inside me. A family heirloom. As if it had always belonged to them. As if I was just a footnote in their story. I excused myself and went to find Daniel. He was talking with his uncle near the dance floor, but when he saw my face, he broke away and came to me. "Do you want to go home?" he asked gently. I shook my head. "Not yet. I need a minute." He nodded, wrapping his arms around me. "I'm proud of you, you know, for being so generous." I rested my head on his shoulder, letting his warmth steady me. "I just hope it was worth it." He kissed the top of my head. "It will be. You'll see." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. I danced with Daniel, made polite conversation, smiled for photos. But inside, I felt hollow. I watched as Evelyn and Lila basked in the glow of the celebration, their bond stronger than ever. I wondered if I would ever feel that kind of acceptance. When it was finally time to leave, I hugged Lila and wished her happiness. She squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with gratitude. Evelyn hugged me too, her embrace stiff and formal. "Thank you again, dear. You've made this day so special for Lila." I nodded, biting back the words I wanted to say. Words about fairness, about belonging, about how it felt to give and never quite be enough. Daniel and I drove home in silence. The rain had started, tapping softly against the windshield. I watched the headlights blur on the wet pavement, my thoughts swirling. When we got home, I went straight to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. Daniel sat beside me, his hand resting on my knee. "Talk to me," he said softly. I stared at my hands, searching for the right words. I feel like I lost something today. Not just the dress. Something bigger." He squeezed my knee. "You didn't lose anything. You gave a gift. That takes strength." I looked at him, tears brimming in my eyes. "But what if I never get it back? What if I'm always on the outside?" He pulled me into his arms, holding me tight. "You're not on the outside. Not with me. Not ever." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to let his words fill the empty spaces inside me. But the ache lingered, stubborn and deep. A week passed, then two. I tried to move on, to focus on work, on friends, on the small joys of daily life. But every time I opened my closet, the empty space where my dress had hung stared back at me, a silent reminder of what I'd given up. I waited for a call, a message, a sign that the dress was coming home, but there was nothing, just silence. One afternoon, I decided to call Evelyn. My hand shook as I dialed her number. She answered on the third ring, her voice brisk. "Hello? Hi, Evelyn, it's me. I was just wondering about the dress. When should I expect it back?" There was a pause, just long enough to make my heart race. "Oh, I thought Lila would have told you," she said, her tone casual. "She's keeping it. She wants to wear it for her anniversary party next year. I hope that's all right." I felt the world tilt beneath me. She's keeping it? Yes, dear. It means so much to her. I'm sure you understand. I opened my mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come. I felt small, powerless, erased. I have to go, I said, my voice barely steady. Goodbye, Evelyn. I hung up, my hands trembling. The ache in my chest flared, sharp and hot. It wasn't just a dress. It was my story, and now it was gone. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time after that call, staring at the wall, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I felt numb, as if I'd been hollowed out. I tried to tell myself it was just a dress, that I was being silly, that I should be happy for Lila. But the truth was, I felt betrayed. By Evelyn, by Lila, even by Daniel, in a way. I had given something precious, and it had been taken as if it were nothing. That night, Daniel found me sitting in the dark. He flicked on the lamp, his face etched with concern. Did you talk to Mom? He asked. I nodded, my voice barely a whisper. She said Lila's keeping the dress. For her anniversary. He sat beside me, silent for a moment. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I thought it was just for the wedding. I looked at him, searching his face for answers. Why does it always feel like I'm the one who has to give in? Why does your mother never ask what I want? He reached for my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my skin. She's complicated. She's always been that way. But I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry. I wanted to be angry, to shout, to demand that he fix it. But all I could do was cry. Quiet, aching sobs that left me feeling even emptier. Daniel held me until the tears stopped. I will get it back, he promised. I'll talk to her. I'll talk to Lila. I won't let them do this to you. But I knew deep down that it wasn't just about the dress. It was about respect, about being seen, about belonging. The next day, Daniel called Evelyn. I listened from the hallway, my heart pounding. Mom, it's not right, he said, his voice firm. The dress belongs to my wife. She lent it to Lila. She didn't give it away. I couldn't hear Evelyn's response, but I could imagine her tone. Calm, dismissive, full of that quiet authority she wielded so well. Daniel's voice grew sharper. No, Mom, this isn't about Lila. It's about you not respecting my wife. You need to make this right. He hung up, his face flushed with anger. She said she'd talk to Lila, but I wouldn't hold my breath. I nodded, grateful for his support, but the ache in my chest remained. A few days later, I got a message from Lila. She wanted to meet for coffee. I hesitated, but curiosity and a need for closure won out. We met at a small cafe downtown, the kind with chipped mugs and faded curtains. Lila was already there, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice soft. I sat across from her, my hands folded in my lap. I just want my dress back, Lila. That's all. She looked down, her eyes shining with guilt. I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much it meant to you. Mom made it sound like you were happy to give it to me. I shook my head, my voice trembling. It was my wedding dress. My mother helped me pick it out. I wore it on the most important day of my life. I lent it to you because I thought it would bring us closer. But now it feels like I don't matter. Lila reached across the table, her hand covering mine. You do matter. I'm sorry. I'll have it cleaned and returned to you this week. I promise. I nodded, relief and sadness mingling in my chest. Thank you. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. Finally, Lila spoke. You know, Mom's always been difficult. She wants things her way. I spent my whole life trying to please her. I thought if I wore your dress, maybe she'd finally see me as perfect. But I see now that it wasn't fair to you. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a rival, but another woman struggling to be enough. I hope you have a happy marriage, Lila, I said quietly. But I need to start standing up for myself. She nodded, tears in her eyes. You should. We both should. True to her word, Lila returned the dress a few days later. It was carefully cleaned and pressed, wrapped in tissue paper. When I opened the box, I ran my fingers over the lace, feeling a wave of emotion, relief, gratitude, and something like pride. I hung the dress back in my closet, in its rightful place. It wasn't just a piece of fabric. It was a symbol of my story, my strength, my right to be seen. Evelyn never apologized. She never mentioned the dress again. But something shifted after that. She visited less often, her comments less pointed. Maybe she realized she couldn't erase me, no matter how hard she tried. Daniel and I grew closer. He saw me, really saw me, in a way he hadn't before. We talked more, laughed more, built new memories together. I started baking again, filling the house with the scent of cinnamon and sugar, reclaiming the small joys that made life sweet. I learned that sometimes standing up for yourself means risking conflict, risking being misunderstood, but it also means reclaiming your dignity, your story, your place in the world. The weeks after the dress came home were quieter, but not empty. I found myself thinking less about what I'd lost, and more about what I'd learned. There was a new steadiness in me, a sense that I could weather disappointment and still hold on to myself. Daniel noticed the change too. He started coming home earlier, bringing flowers from the market, or a new recipe he wanted to try. We spent evenings in the kitchen, laughing over burnt cookies and spilled flour, rediscovering the comfort of each other's company. Sometimes he'd catch me looking at the closet where my dress now hung, and he'd squeeze my hand, as if to say, I see you. I'm here. One Sunday, my parents invited us over for dinner. The house smelled like roast chicken and fresh bread, and my mother greeted me with a long, tight hug. She didn't ask about the dress, but I could tell she was relieved to see me smiling again. After dinner, as we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees, my father cleared his throat. You know, sweetheart, sometimes family isn't about blood or tradition. It's about who stands by you when things get hard. I nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle in my chest. I thought about Lila, about Evelyn, about the ways we all tried to belong, to be chosen. I realized that I didn't need Evelyn's approval to be part of this family. I just needed to be true to myself. A few days later, I ran into Lila at the grocery store. She looked different, less polished, more real. She smiled when she saw me, and for the first time, it felt genuine. Hey, she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Hey, how are you? I'm good, I replied, and I meant it. We stood in the produce aisle, talking about small things, work, recipes, the weather. There was an ease between us that hadn't been there before. As we parted, she touched my arm. Thank you, she said softly, for everything. I hope we can start over. I smiled. I'd like that. Evelyn's presence in our lives faded, but she never disappeared completely. She still sent cards on birthdays and holidays, still called Daniel every now and then, but she no longer tried to control or correct me. I think, in her own way, she realized that I wasn't going anywhere. One afternoon, as I was grading papers at the kitchen table, Daniel came in with a letter in his hand. It's from Mom, he said, handing it to me. I opened it, expecting another polite note or a recipe clipped from a magazine. But inside was a short handwritten message. Dear Emily, I know things haven't always been easy between us. I hope you know that I do care about you, even if I don't always show it. Thank you for loving my son, and for being part of our family. Evelyn. It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was something. a small olive branch, extended in her own careful way. I folded the letter and tucked it into my journal. I didn't need her approval, but it felt good to be acknowledged. As the seasons changed, so did I. I started saying yes to things I'd once avoided. Book clubs, yoga classes, weekend trips with friends. I let myself take up space, to be seen and heard. I realized that my worth wasn't tied to anyone else's opinion, not even my mother-in-law's. Daniel and I talked about starting a family, about what kind of parents we wanted to be. I told him I wanted our children to know they were loved, just as they were. No conditions, no comparisons. He smiled, pulling me close. They'll be lucky to have you. I smiled back, feeling a quiet certainty settle in my bones. One evening, as I was putting away laundry, I paused in front of the closet. I opened the door and ran my fingers over the dress, the lace soft beneath my touch. I thought about all it had seen, the joy, the pain, the lessons learned. I realized then that the dress was just a symbol. The real strength was in me, in my ability to forgive, to stand up for myself, to choose kindness, even when it wasn't returned. I closed the closet, feeling lighter than I had in months. Sometimes, the things we hold dearest aren't just objects. They're pieces of our story, stitched together with hope, memory, and love. My wedding dress was never just fabric and lace. It was a symbol of the day I promised myself to Daniel, of the family I dreamed we'd build, of the woman I was becoming. Losing it, even for a little while, forced me to face the ways I'd been trying to fit into someone else's idea of family. It hurt deeply to feel overlooked and unappreciated. But in that pain, I found my own voice. I learned that standing up for myself didn't make me selfish. It made me whole. I also learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting or pretending nothing happened. It's about letting go of the need for someone else's approval and choosing to move forward with dignity and grace. Even when apologies don't come, we can still choose peace for ourselves. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own story, or if you've given something precious and felt invisible in return, I hope you know you're not alone. Your worth isn't measured by how others treat you, but by how you honor yourself. Would you have lent your dress, knowing what I know now? Would you have fought harder or walked away sooner? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If my story touched you, please consider subscribing and sharing your own experiences below. We're all learning how to belong, how to forgive, and how to stand tall in our own lives. Thank you for listening.